Lex Fridman, I think, is a prime example what you can do if you just stay focused. I don't know about his work ethic. There is one video on YouTube where he shows his typical workday, but usually if you show your typical workday, of course you kind of make things a little bit better than they are. It depends on your character, I guess, and also of the representation you want to have in public. Nevertheless, I think it becomes obvious in his interviews on YouTube and also on his podcast, basically the same thing, that he struggles with talking to people, kind of. And he also struggles with preparing for these interviews. He also states it in his interviews that he procrastinates on the preparation for these interviews. And nevertheless, he manages to get in the really big names of our days and asks them deep questions other people would maybe avoid because they are just might be so controversial. And he also still manages to invite controversial guests and be not banned like Joe Rogan on certain episodes or for certain guests on different platforms. So therefore, he takes a huge risk because every single person could basically end his career. Not completely end his career, but Joe Rogan style. Joe Rogan, if you don't know, has also a podcast which is called GRE, or the Joe Rogan Podcast, and he invited a few medical doctors who talked about COVID-19, kind of a little bit critical. And because so many people watch Joe Rogan, because so many people listen to Joe Rogan, the problem now is that if there is something that is not completely right, people might object to this, and people did object to it. So there was a musician who threatened first to pull his music from Spotify, and then others joined in too, and they actually went through. So what this means now is that we have more censorship, that more censorship is coming, which is also just part of an evolution of this entire space, because if you talk in public, and if you talk in public to tens of people, to thousands of people, to even hundred thousands or millions of people, it becomes more and more important that the thing you actually put out is right, that the thing you are trying to do is something that is not based on single emotions, for example. It is not based on you. For example, another big podcasting name, Alex Cooper, she also has a podcast. It's called Call Her Daddy, and she had a co-host before, and she went on YouTube and publicly discussed what went down in basically what is known as, there is no special name, I wanted to introduce a special name here. So they had some problems about the contract basically at the company they were at, Barstool, and they basically wanted to sign a new deal, and the other person had different opinions on the deal than the person who is Alex Cooper. And now Alex Cooper went on YouTube and basically stated what she thought was the situation. And I saw this video a while ago, and I thought, oh, who is Alex Cooper? Because she has a podcast and it sold for a few hundred millions to Spotify, an exclusive deal for the next few years. And then I watched this video and I saw that I basically became intrigued, because drama is always kind of intriguing, also for me, I guess. And now the idea is this. It's not the idea. What I found out later was that the other person, because of her going out there and basically publicly saying that what this person did wrong and how kind of little bit shady this all was, this person got bombarded with negative messages for weeks, for months, basically on a daily basis. And just the consequences of something like this, the consequences of going online and shading one of your previous best friends who was also your podcast host. This is not about what is right or wrong, it's just there are more and more consequences attributed to speaking in public. And this is something we currently are exploring as a human civilization, I guess, and we haven't figured it out. And censorship currently seems to be a way which many are willing to go. At least the platforms are willing to go, because the masses are kind of forcing them to. So now when it goes back to Lex Fridman now, first to Joe Rogan and then to Lex Fridman. Joe Rogan now has Spotify, and because he signed an exclusive deal on Spotify, this now for him is a problem because it's the only platform he delivers his podcast to apart from YouTube, where he also shares clips. But now this is also a problem of exclusivity, of course. But the idea is now, or what went down is that now Spotify actually removed also from the back catalog of, so basically the previous podcasts and recordings of these podcasts in video form, it removed a lot of these episodes. The episodes that had something in them that was maybe a little bit critical. And think about what you said to friends, for example. What you already said to friends, or what you said about a friend to another friend. Think about what it would mean if all these things were public. And there is also another aspect to this. The aspect that we kind of get confirmed in the way we act because these other people do obviously wrong. And also, if you take a look at Will Smith, for example, everybody's like, oh yeah, he did wrong. And yet we fail to see the similarities to our private lives because we constantly do something like this. I, for example, have so many things, not so many, but this sounds wrong, but there are just so many things that if you think about them, they are not completely right. You could have done better. You shouldn't have talked about this person like this. And in their absence, maybe you shouldn't talk negatively about people at all. Or, I mean, what is the difference between kind of normal fact-based critic and also kind of private critic, which kind of brings the person down? So now, this is Joe Rogan. So now he has a COVID disclaimer on the episodes that are touching COVID, and he also now has a lot of his episodes removed, which basically means less views, I guess. And also just the fact that at any given point in time, an external force, an external party entity can now say, oh, what you did there was wrong. So basically, apart from the idea, one of the ideas about podcasting, about broadcasting, about self-broadcasting, either audio podcasting or video podcasting or audio and video in general, is the idea that you are in control. And now it's much more like a classic work relationship again, because Joe Rogan basically is now more and more, of course not completely, and this is also just a trend, but it becomes more obvious that he more and more has to apply or comply, I think is the right word, to external rules, which basically give him an employee status, a Spotify employee status, at least currently under the current contract. So when it comes now back to Lex Fridman, he actually recently went on in several episodes and said he wanted to talk to Vladimir Putin. And now imagine if he did this. Imagine kind of what it would mean for YouTube, because there will be a backlash. There will be people that are saying you cannot talk to a person publicly like this. You cannot have a person be publicly displayed. You cannot give a person like Vladimir Putin the chance to maybe explain his actions further, because the actions are not right. And this is something I think we all have to figure out. And Lex Fridman is one of the prime examples, I think, again back to the beginning, what it means to go out there and go just try to move the line a little bit more and a little bit more. Not in terms of what is controversial and what you can put out there, but in terms of what you actually can do with work. So he basically knows, he also talks often in the beginning, what I wanted to say is he basically knows a lot of famous people now, not specifically famous, but a lot of important people, scientists, current day scientists that are maybe on the top level of their field. And he knows them now personally. This is also, I think, a really nice side effect, not that I experienced the side effect, but of podcasting, because you don't have to have a specific reason for you to want to talk to this person, because you already have a reason, and it's work. It's you interviewing this person, and it's giving you both something you can work with. It's giving you both exposure. and it's basically benefiting you both. Whereas if you ask a person otherwisely for something, or ask a person like somebody went on Logan Paul's vlog, not really went on, but he filmed it, and asked him for work opportunities basically. And the idea is now, what is the benefit Logan Paul has? He probably has to train this employee and probably has more time invested than he actually gets out of it. So when it comes to how to get to know people, it, I think, is a very nice social hack if you are just able to have a reason. And this is also what I experienced kind of in my private life. I actually went, so I was in a student accommodation, and I was kind of a little bit in the administration side. And it's just so easy to talk to people because you just have a reason for it, or people just constantly come up and ask you things, and then you constantly get to know new people. And I think with podcasting, it's even better. That's kind of this whole version on steroids, because if you have a kind of popular podcast, and then people can gain exposure, and you can basically message the people that you admire and maybe have them on their podcast, which is, I guess, for a certain extent, what Lex Fridman actually did. And his podcast is actually not that old. It only came up, I think, in the last maybe at max 2 years. But he's now a household name in the podcasting space. And when it comes to the selection of guests that are on there, I think it's kind of one of the best podcasts out there. There is also Andrew Huberman, another big podcast I currently really enjoy, but he doesn't invite a lot of these guests that also talk about common topics, you could say, but he only invites guests about very specific fields, about very specific scientific topics. And that's why Lex Fridman is kind of on the verge of podcasting, I think.